Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next episode of the CX Goalkeeper podcast. Today I'm really super thrilled because Stefan Leuthold from the company Stimmt, it's a small consulting company in Switzerland around customer experience, is here together with me. Hi Stefan, how are you?
Hi Greg, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. We know in Switzerland that you are really the expert for the topic human-centered design. And in that case, I want really to say thank you very much for your time, sharing your knowledge, your 20 or more years of experience on this topic on this podcast. And therefore, thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. As usual, we start this game with a short introduction of the top player. Today's top player is Stefan Leuthold, and therefore, Stefan, could you please introduce yourself and share also your values together with us?
So my name is Stefan. I'm a father, husband, entrepreneur, consultant. I got a master's degree in theoretical physics and a PhD in cognitive psychology. And what drives me professionally and in private life is understanding human behavior better, being able to explain why people do what they do. I like learning new theories and seeing them in action. Pushes me a lot to read and then see what I read in the real world. That's mostly related to psychology. And what also drives me is I believe in right and wrong. I think not everybody should do as they please. And as a physicist, you're used to proving stuff, and you can always say, okay, this is the right way to do it, and this is not the right way to do it. This is also a lot that drives me professionally, finding out what is the right way to do something.
Thank you, Stefan. You said behavioral science, and I am now feeling a bit uncomfortable because I don't want to make the wrong movements that you're saying now, what you're doing and what you're not doing, or that you try to find out what I'm thinking about. But as I know you, I feel comfortable because we can have a nice discussion together. Let's start the game. It's human-centered design. A lot of people speak about. Not many people are really able to apply human-centered design in a proper way. And you and Stimmt are able to do that, and you did that several times in a lot of different industry. Could you please share with us what is human-centered design?
Today, human-centered design is a process as specified in an ISO standard. It's part of the ISO 9241. And the process basically says, if you build any kind of system, and the original focus was on computer systems, you should start with understanding the actual humans that have to or want to use that system in the future. And then you should come up with a design solution addressing the user's, customer's requirements. And finally, you should test the whole thing on a conceptual level to find out whether it works before you invest a lot of time and money to build it, and then actual users can or won't use it.
Thank you for this short introduction. Let's quickly deep dive. You said human as an employee, human as a customer. Could you please elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing today are not designed for humans. All of us humans, for example, stuff that you can't see, but you should respond to that on the screen. And then the system asks you, can you enter this or that number in a registration form? And then you have to get out and search your entire apartment because you just don't know where it is. But the system requests it at this very moment, or otherwise the whole process is doomed. That's something that's very easy to understand. It should be fixed, and we should know that it occurs. When it comes to employees or to customers, there's other dimensions that are relevant. For example, the goals for employees. So what do you want them to do? How do you want them to feel? And that should be incorporated in the design process. Because what we do here at the office should serve the people who work here. What we do for customers should help them buy stuff or use stuff and complain about stuff and get support issues fixed. And all of this is relevant when we do the process and should be incorporated in the requirements that should be applied to design solutions.
Thank you, Stefan. And perhaps to visualize what you are saying, there is always this big question and this picture that we are seeing in the social media. On one side, the search bar of Google, it's only one line where you can type in something. Yeah. And on the other side, you see the cockpit of an airplane Boeing 747, and you need to find out where you need to push to get your answer. And I think this is really a very nice visualization. But now you already shared that a bit, but really let's deep dive on that. Why is it nowadays relevant for organization human-centered design?
Yeah, many organizations are still throwing a lot of resources at solutions they're not sure will work when they implement them. The very smart people sit there, figure out what should be done about a system, and then they go about implementing it without asking anyone who's a potential user or customer of the outcome. Is that what you actually need? Is that what serves your purpose? And then this goes wrong. And it's most obvious when it comes to new trends like artificial intelligence or the Internet of Things or the metaverse. We barely know what it is, but we are sure it will boost productivity or sales or whatnot if we can just pull it off as a company. and then people make big bets on it. And the reality is actual users have actual barriers we don't even understand, but we're still willing to bet huge budgets that they're going to use it and it will be successful for us. In most cases, it's really easy to do a prototype and checking whether users get what the solution is about and whether they really integrate the solution into their daily lives. And I think it's actually quite useful to do that with the human-centered design process to find out what they need before you derive what a system should be able to do.
I think you mentioned that not willing to be unpolite with who discovered that, but speaking about virtual reality, augmented reality, and metaverse, these are solutions looking for problems because we need to find out for which use case they really fit. And I think perhaps at this point in time, it could be also interesting to quickly deep dive into these three phases that you mentioned: understand, design, and then test, and then repeating and repeating and repeating. Could you let's start with the understand phase? How do you normally structure the first phase?
The understand phase serves the purpose to generate the actual requirements of a product or solution or process, not the things that we think it should do, but the things that it actually should do, because the users or customers or employees tell us. And the first hurdle is always to figure out who do we use for interviews, because not everybody agrees on the primary type of user of a new product or system. And of course, as in strategy problems, people say, yeah, basically, this should be all things for all people. And because that's not possible, the first hurdle is always to figure out who is it for now? What kind of employee, what type of user? And from there on, everything else can be derived. And then we usually interview or observe users, look at statistics, if there are some statistics about actual usage of a former product, for example. And then we pull that together to model behavior that helps us understand or even predict how users behave, because they're driven by certain goals or motives or needs or attitudes. And then we can figure out what a system should do or a product should do in response.
As I am a learner of these methods, I already know the answer that you are going to give, but I think this is extremely important because a lot of people are saying, okay, Stefan, I understand you, but you need to interview a lot of people to get the information and to find out what are these behavioral drivers. And from your point of view or from the statistics, how many people or interviewee are required to understand how this group of people, this segment is behaving?
It is a huge body of literature, and even some of my ex-employees have written their master's thesis in psychology about this. How many people do you need to understand basically all the requirements that are really important to build a system or a product or a process? And it turns out to be somewhere between 5 and 8 or 10. not more, because you can see when you draw up charts how many new things do you find out in the next interview. So for example, I learned 10 important things in the first interview, then I learned these same 10 things, but 2 additional things in the second interview, and in the third interview I learned 3 more things, and all of a sudden you will realize after 5 through 8, 10 interviews, you won't learn anything new. So you can stop there. And then this is I think I'm 40 years old now, the first curves. How much new knowledge do you gather from the next interview that you conduct? And then of course, if you're through and want to test the solution in the third stage, at some point you will need to quantify, is this addressing 80% of the possible market, or is it addressing 5% of the possible market? And this is very important also, but it's not necessary to understand. Once you know where your focus is, you need 5 to 10 users from that very group that you put your focus on, and that's enough.
The one interesting thing is that 5 to 10 and not 500 to 100. And therefore it's extremely interesting, because it's always possible to get customer and employees participating to these interviews. Perhaps also from your experience, are customers willing to participate to these interviews?
Yeah. In the B2C context, it's never a problem. And sometimes companies say, well, but we are in the B2B area, and we need to interview oncologists or corporate clients of big banks, and they are not willing to give interviews. And on the contrary, most of them, they're glad that finally somebody takes the time to really understand what they need and understand where they see the problem in processes or in offerings of our clients. And mostly they're very glad to share their opinion and to see the results. If a year later you can say, oh, this big change happened in my online banking because people like me gave an interview, which Stimmt, that's very satisfying for them too.
Thank you. I think we understand a bit more now the understand phase. Sorry for the joke. And we move into the design and into the design phase. And there what always stick in my mind, you said that several months ago, it's this sentence, users are not designers. Could you please elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, that's one of the principles from one of my favorite books. It's from 1993. And the book is called Usability Engineering by Jacob Nielsen. And then Jacob Nielsen is one of the founders of the whole field of human-centered design that obviously has got a lot in common with the human-centered design process. And Jacob Nielsen makes the point that many managers or many system engineers believe, because they also are somehow users of everything they produce, they can figure out how a system should behave and what it should do for actual users. And this is never true. And one of the main reasons is that all the implicit knowledge that they have isn't available for actual users. And so in our first few, mostly big banking projects in the beginning of the 2000s, like 25 years back, we always had to tell the banks, this system is perfectly designed for people who have a 4-year apprenticeship in banking. But all that knowledge that you have is not available for your actual users of the online banking system. So the system should be designed for them. So these are two directions to look at it. So users are not designers. We can't just ask them what they need and they can tell us, because they have no understanding of the domain. On the other hand, managers are not designers because they themselves don't understand how actual users behave and what they need. It goes both ways.
And what you're saying, it's really interesting, because we are speaking about design. And in this design phase, you create prototypes that you try also to align and to understand if they are working properly. How many cycles are required, or how many prototypes are required? Because I think, and I had also some experiences on that, you create the first prototype, you're super happy with all of the process, and then the user are saying that's not what we were asking for. What are your advices there?
Yeah. it depends on how big the whole system is and where you start. But usually you try to organize a design process so you go from the big ideas to the small details. For example, if 15 years back a client says, I need mobile banking, we don't start with a prototype that details 100 screens of a potential mobile banking system with all possible interactions. We just draw up 2 or 3 main screens of main tasks that serve main goals of our primary user group, and then show those screens with the corresponding screens in a laptop, for example, to a bunch of users and try to figure out what does it do for them. Where do they need mobile now when they explain how they integrate it into their lives? And this is really better than the current solution. And if it is, we might say, okay, first round, pass. So how do we detail this out for the second round? Another type of user group or more screens with more details. And you tackle the problem like this. And very hard problems, I think it's quite frequent that you need 2 or 3 rounds to tackle a pretty hard problem, even 5 maybe. But then you probably call it quits and say, if I have 5 rounds of user testing, then all the 5 rounds say, don't do it, we should probably not do it and do something else, and abandon the feature or the project or whatever is in scope.
And as you're saying, I think it's really interesting because at the end, it's exactly the same. If companies implement the complete mobile banking, as you said, and then test it with user, is much more expensive than having these quick prototypes. And after 5 iterations, you say, I don't need that. Yeah. But now let's move into the validate phase. How do you structure the validate phase?
Yeah, so if you have a design that can be tested, and that's usually possible with very low frequency prototypes. Of course, you can develop a system and test the developed system that really works as it would in the real world. But usually we always say, if you can show it on paper and for the people looking at the paper, it looks like the actual thing, what goes on in their head is much like as it would go with the actual thing. So they don't really differentiate between what they see on paper and what they see on a mobile phone, for example. So you can test stuff out with paper prototypes and then probably clickable prototypes. Or what we do when it comes to value propositions, we just draw up a few ads that you would see when you walk through Zurich main station, and you see the ads hanging around the walls, or Google ads that you could click on or not click on. And then we just see what happens if we show people, this is a Google search result screen, and one of the ads that they see is the one we drew up, and all the other ads are actual ads that are on the market today. And we'll see, what do they click, what do they comment, and then we find out whether our stuff works or it doesn't work. Mostly you need to think through that before you start the design, obviously, because the design needs to produce stuff that's tested as a prototype, but almost everything can be prototyped and tested with the same amount of users, like 5 to 10 users are usually enough to learn whether what you did is successful or not successful.
Thank you very much. We went through this cycle: understand, design, and validate, and it start again. But now let's start it, or let's discuss really about an example. Can you share with us an example of a successful implementation that you did in the past?
Yeah. As we're talking about banking, probably one of my first big banking projects was an online banking redesign back in 2004. And in 2004, when we analyzed user behavior and talked to users in the understand phase, we noticed, of course, why do you log into an online bank? To pay your monthly bills. But what do you always do before you pay your monthly bills? You look at the accounts. So how much do I have? Before I just send away a few bills and then realize, I don't have enough money in my account to pay all my bills. Now, guess what's on the home screen of our client's bank? The home screen that you see after you log in.
All the bills.
No, nothing, right? It's empty. And why is it empty? Because the engineer's task building the online bank is to make all the online banking functions accessible. And because they have no reason to believe that something is much more frequent than anything else, they don't just take it out of the whole navigation and put it on the front screen. They just give you the entire navigation and say, okay, welcome, this is the online bank. So pick a navigation point and then we'll see what you can do. But that's not how users think, right? Their job is to check whether I have, for example, did my employer pay me so I can now go and do my bills? This is what they check. This is their task, and the system should be optimized for that task. And now we said, okay, guys, after login, they should see all their accounts, and they should see how much money is in there. And then you can ask them, what do you want to do next? Because you know this is what they always do. And they changed that, and a few years later, all the other banks in Switzerland copied that. And now when you log in, there's not a single bank that I remember that doesn't show the accounts and the balance directly after login, because that's the only thing that makes sense, starting from the understand phase, when you really know what users are doing.
But I think what you are saying, it's also related to the past, because when there was no online banking and you still had this small booklet checking all your transactions, the first thing that you were looking for was how much money do I have in my account? Yeah. Because then you were aware of, can I spend that money, or can't I spend that money? It's really, really interesting. And thinking about your experience, what advice would you give to companies who are considering embracing human-centered design as part of their transformation journey?
Yeah. I think what sometimes happens, and I can't say it's always a disaster, but it's very, very hard, is that people want to start big. So but now we are convinced it's really necessary. We need a human-centered design team, customer experience team, user experience team, however you want to call it. Then we hire a bunch of people and just do it toll gates in every project, and completely different way of working together, and different jobs for different people. I think that's very hard, and I would recommend against that. What I would do is start small. Pick a few people who are willing to change something internally, and then just pull them together and, for example, do a boot camp, do the Google Sprint from the book that Jake Knapp has written, because then you will see, with a little bit of preparation, a little bit of help from people who know how the process works, you can start on a Monday and then tell your management on a Friday which of their ideas that they gave you on Monday actually worked with actual users, and which of their ideas are a little bit silly and probably won't work if they're implemented. And this only takes a week of everybody's time, is great fun, and demonstrates the value of doing stuff in that fashion. And if you'd like it, you can scale it up afterwards. And the other thing is start low fidelity. So no fancy apps, no new software to work internally, no eye tracking stuff, no new people hired. Just start as low fidelity as possible, just printing stuff out. If it was for me, print stuff from PowerPoint, do your prototypes with PowerPoint in the first iteration, and then just understand how it works for you, and what you like to do with that, and then just take it from there. And then don't buy. We have clients who buy eye tracking software to build up a usability lab, and then they realize eye tracking is one method amongst dozens of methods that's used every other year to really optimize something, and only eye tracking optimize. But now you've bought the eye tracker, so everything is measured with eye tracking. It doesn't make sense, but you need to do it, and that's not what I would recommend.
Thank you, Stefan. And now moving from your advices to the second part of this discussion, it's about leadership. And you gave some advice, but I think throughout your career, you learned also a lot. Could you share, please, with us one of your biggest failure and what you learned from it?
Yeah, the failure in my business, the consulting business, is pretty simple. You hire a lot of great people to work on a lot of great projects, and everybody's responsible for themselves, and everybody's happy. doing great work. But there's a very crucial thing that I got wrong a few times. And I always hope it never happens again, that I trust consultants that they can flourish in a new role, for example, after a promotion, or in a new complex project, for example, internationally, different languages, different cultures, some challenges that they never encountered, or a nasty client or a new colleague that's not really a fit. And my biggest mistake is to just let that be and say, well, I had to do it in my 25 years as an entrepreneur and consultant, my company. So you, of course, you can do it too, because if I'm able to do it, you're able to do it. And sometimes this is wrong. Don't recognize the warning signs, and things go south before I have a chance to react. And then the very good people quit or don't deliver very good projects. And that's a shame, and the shame's on me.
Thank you for sharing this story where we can learn, and I think a lot of people can also empathize with what you are saying. Perhaps to the last question on leadership, what's your definition of resilience?
Yeah, of course, for everything, if there's an ISO norm, I use the ISO norm as a human-centered design, and there's an ISO norm for resilience too. And that norm says resilience is the ability to adapt to change in the environment. And that's something that I'm happy to say I got it down. I can become happy very quickly in new environments and can arrange myself with new circumstances. But many people, they feel treated unfairly, or change happens too fast and the impact on their lives is too big, and they have problem accommodating and adjusting to the change in environment, and they're not as resilient.
I really like your answer and how you structured that, because first came the physicians using the definition, and then the psychologist also sharing how you are really living that. And therefore, thank you very much for that. We are coming to an end of this game, but I still have 3 questions for you in the extra time of this episode. In 10 years from now, we are back on the CX Goalkeeper podcast. What are we discussing about?
One of the things we'll sort of be discussing is what happens as in journalism, right? Some people still want to read the print edition, although it's almost not feasible anymore to keep that up. What do you do with them? We will discuss what happens in the metaverse. The majority of the players in the industry, they will have switched to deploying algorithms that generate virtual concerts with virtual bands, generating artificial songs on the spot for people who want to watch that and have time now and probably have a subscription with the provider. What do we do with the majority of customers that don't want that want actual musicians on or actual artists? Can be dance as well, right? Doesn't have to be music. What do we do with the majority of customers who want actual people on an actual stage and meet other actual people right next to them and travel to places to have the concert experience? I think that will be an unsolved problem, because the investments in metaverse are huge, and everybody wants to have an application and get the share of the cake. I'm not sure it would turn out as people now expect.
And I think we could apply human-centered design to understand that better.
Yeah, of course. That's one of the prime examples, new technology, right? So if we show people this is what a virtual concert would feel like. So you and your friends are either sitting in the same room, all wearing what's the weight of the Apple Vision? I think one journalist said after 25 to 30 minutes, it's the weight is too much to bear, and you need to take it off because it doesn't feel right after 25 to 30 minutes. I forgot the actual weight of the thing. But if that doesn't come down dramatically, people just sit there with huge things on their head, and after half an hour they will go, well, can this concert come to an end, please? I need to take it off now, but I don't want to interrupt the whole thing for everybody else. And Yeah, you could describe that to people and say, what's going to go down now? What's cool about that? Oh, my friends in the US can join a concert with friends in Zurich. Yeah, that's great. And what's not cool about it? Yeah, okay, if I now feel the actual thing, it's a little bit heavy for what I'm trying to do here. Enjoy a concert with my friends, and you can test that, of course, now before you invest millions or billions even. To come up with stuff where you see, oh, people take off their glasses after half an hour. We didn't expect that.
Stefan, I think we have another topic for the next episode. I know that you love to be on podcast,
Yeah,
and therefore perhaps I will wait some weeks or months to ask again. But I think anyhow, I'm quite sure that some people will have some question around what we discussed and human-centered design. What's the best way to contact you?
I think you find me on my website, www.stimmt.ch. And Stimmt is spelled STIMMT. And you have to know German though, or have a good translator activated in your browser.
As we are speaking about the future, ChatGPT can help you translating what is on the Stimmt page.
True.
But we can also share, if you allow that, your LinkedIn profile, so that people then can contact directly. Thank you very much. And now we are coming to the last question. Is Stefan's golden nugget? It's something that we discussed or something new that you would like to leave to the audience?
Yeah. My golden nugget is a successful company is close to its customers, and a really successful company is also close to its employees. Because purpose, strategy, profits, whatever else follows.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Stefan, please stay with me. I really want to say thank you for everything that you shared together with us and everything that you are doing for me also outside of this podcast. Thank you very much. Stay with me. To the audience, it's everything. I hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as I did. Stay tuned for the next episode, and we love feedback. Please let us know what you think about this episode. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share the word of mouth, subscribe it, share it. Until the next episode, please don't forget, we are not in a B2B or B2C business, we are in a human-to-human environment. Thank you!